The arrow punched through Gareth Ironwood's shoulder, and he barely noticed because the orc girl beneath him was still breathing. And that was all that mattered in the chaos of that autumn afternoon. 2 weeks earlier, Gareth had been riding the northern border patrol with a dozen other soldiers from Fort Millstone, watching for raiders and bandits in the rolling hill country where three kingdoms met and no law held firm. He was 26 years old, a veteran of enough skirmishes to know when to draw his sword and when to keep it sheathed, and he had long ago stopped believing in the glory of war. The patrol was routine work, boring even, until they crested a ridge and saw smoke rising from a farmstead in the valley below. They reached the burning buildings too late to save anyone. The family lay scattered in the yard, cut down as they fled. Gareth dismounted and walked through the destruction with his jaw clenched, looking for survivors even though he knew he would find none. It was the work of raiders, probably the same group that had been harrying the border settlements for months. His commander ordered them to bury the dead and move on. That night, they made camp in a grove of oak trees, and Gareth drew first watch. He sat with his back against a tree trunk, listening to the night sounds and thinking about the dead family. He was tired of this work, tired of arriving too late, tired of the endless cycle of violence that seemed to define these borderlands. He had signed on for one more year of service, and after that he planned to take his pay and disappear somewhere quiet, maybe by a small farm far from any frontier. The sound that brought him to his feet was barely audible, a faint rustling in the undergrowth. He drew his sword silently and moved toward it, every sense alert. What he found made him pause in confusion. An orc girl crouched in the bushes, her green skin pale in the moonlight, her dark eyes wide with fear. She could not have been more than 18 or 19 years old, young by any measure. Her clothes were torn and muddy, and she held one arm against her side as though injured. When she saw him, she froze like a cornered animal. Gareth knew what he was supposed to do. Orcs were the enemy, had been for generations. The official policy was clear, capture or kill. But this girl was clearly no raider. She was alone, injured, and terrified. He lowered his sword slightly and spoke in a quiet voice. "Easy. I am not going to hurt you." She stared at him, clearly not believing that for a second. Her hand moved to her belt where a small knife hung, but she did not draw it. They watched each other in the moonlight, neither moving. "You are hurt," Gareth said, nodding at the arm she held against her ribs. "Let me help." "Why would you help?" Her voice was rough, accented, but the words were clear. She spoke the common tongue well enough to be understood. "Because you need it," Gareth said simply. He sheathed his sword deliberately, showing her he meant no harm. "My camp is close. I have bandages, medicine. Whatever happened to you, you will not survive out here alone." "Your kind killed my family," she said, and her voice cracked on the last word. Gareth felt something twist in his chest. "When? 3 days ago. They came in the night. We were just travelers moving south for the winter. We had nothing worth stealing, but they killed everyone anyway. My father, my mother, my 2 brothers. I only escaped because I hid like a coward." The words hit Gareth like a physical blow. He thought of the family in the burned farmstead, of all the senseless death he had seen. "I am sorry," he said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I am truly sorry, but you did not hide like a coward. You survived. That takes its own kind of courage." She laughed bitterly. "What does a human soldier know about courage? Enough to know that you need help, and that leaving you here to die would make me the coward." He took a careful step closer. "I give you my word. I will not hurt you, and I will not let anyone else hurt you either. Just let me look at that injury." She studied his face for a long moment, and whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she slowly released her grip on the knife. "If you betray me, I will make you regret it." "Fair enough," Gareth said. He led her back toward the camp, but stopped well short of it, not wanting to explain to his fellow soldiers why he was helping an orc. Instead, he found a sheltered spot near a stream and made her sit while he retrieved his medical supplies. The injury turned out to be 3 broken ribs and some deep bruising, probably from a fall. He wrapped her torso carefully, trying to ignore how aware he was of her presence, of the strange intimacy of the moment. "What is your name?" he asked as he worked. She hesitated, then said, "Nara." "I am Gareth." He finished the wrapping and sat back. "Those ribs will take weeks to heal properly. You need rest, food, somewhere safe to stay." "There is nowhere safe for me, not anymore." Her voice was flat, defeated. Gareth made a decision that surprised even himself. "I know a place. An old hunting cabin about a day's ride west of here. It is abandoned, but the roof is sound. You could stay there while you heal, at least. I can bring you supplies." "Why would you do this?" Nara asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. "I am an orc. Your people hate mine." "I am tired of hate," Gareth said quietly. "I am tired of killing and dying for borders that shift every few years and grudges that no one even remembers the start of. You are hurt and alone. Helping you is the first thing in a long time that has felt right." She was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Show me this cabin." Over the next 2 days, Gareth managed to slip away from his patrol twice to check on Nara. He brought her food, blankets, and a better set of clothes. The cabin was exactly as he remembered it, weathered but solid, hidden in a grove of pine trees where few people ever ventured. Nara seemed to relax slightly each time he visited, though she never fully let down her guard. On his 3rd visit, she asked him about his life. He told her about growing up in a farming village far to the south, about joining the military because it was the only way to earn enough money to help his family. He talked about the battles he had fought and the friends he had lost, about his growing disillusionment with the whole bloody business of war. In turn, she told him about her clan's migration, how they had been traveling for months looking for new lands after their old territory had been overrun by a rival clan. She spoke of her father's stories, of the old orc traditions that were slowly being forgotten, of her dream to find a place where her people could live in peace. "That dream is dead now," she said, staring into the small fire Gareth had built in the cabin's hearth. "I am alone. My clan is gone. I have nothing." "You have your life," Gareth said. "That is not nothing." She looked at him with those dark eyes, and for the first time he saw something other than fear or grief in them. "You are a strange man, Gareth Ironwood. I do not understand you." "I do not always understand myself," he admitted. When his patrol returned to Fort Millstone, Gareth requested a week's leave. His commander, surprised but not suspicious, granted it. Gareth had been a reliable soldier for years, and he had leave time accumulated. He bought supplies in the town near the fort and rode west, back to the cabin. Nara was stronger when he arrived, moving with less pain, though she still held herself carefully. She watched him unpack the supplies with an unreadable expression. "You came back," she said. "I said I would." "People say many things they do not mean." Gareth met her eyes. "I am not those people." Over the following days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Gareth had told himself he would just make sure Nara was settled, then return to his duties. But each morning he found another reason to stay. The roof needed patching. The firewood supply was low. He should teach her the area in case she needed to hunt or forage. The truth, which he was reluctant to admit even to himself, was that he did not want to leave. He had never met anyone quite like Nara. She was fierce and proud, but also thoughtful and surprisingly gentle. She moved with a warrior's grace despite her injuries, and she was quick to laugh when something amused her. She taught him words in the orc tongue, and he taught her more of the common language. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Nara asked him about human customs. "I have heard that your people have many strange rules about courtship and marriage." Gareth chuckled. "Some do. It depends on where you are. In the cities, there are all sorts of formal procedures. But out here on the frontier, people are more practical. When two people want to be together, they just are. And in your village, the one where you grew up, my parents met during a harvest festival. My father said he knew the moment he saw my mother that she was the one he wanted to spend his life with. They were married within a month." He smiled at the memory. "My mother always said he was too impulsive, but she never regretted it." "That sounds nice," Nara said softly. "My parents' marriage was arranged by the clan elders, but they grew to love each other deeply. My father used to bring my mother flowers every spring, these little blue ones that grew by the river. She would act annoyed, but I could see how happy it made her." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Gareth found himself acutely aware of how close she was sitting, how the firelight played across her features. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in spite of her green skin and tusks, but simply beautiful, in a way that made his heart beat faster. He was in trouble, he thought. Deep trouble. The week stretched into 2, and Gareth sent word to the fort that he was dealing with a family emergency and needed more time. It was not entirely a lie. He had come to think of Nara as family, or at least as someone he cared about as much as family. The thought of leaving her alone was unbearable. Nara had noticed the extension of his stay, and one morning she confronted him about it. "You will get in trouble with your commanders if you stay away too long," she said. "Maybe. Gareth." She put her hand on his arm, and the touch sent a jolt through him. "You have done so much for me already. You have given me time to heal, to think, but you cannot throw away your life for me. What if I want to?" The words were out before he could stop them. She stared at him. "What?" "What if I want to stay?" He turned to face her fully. "Nara, these past 2 weeks have been the happiest I have been in years. When I am with you, I feel like myself again. Like I am not just a soldier doing a job I hate. I do not want to go back to that." "You barely know me," she said, but her voice was uncertain. "I know enough. I know you are brave and kind. I know you make me laugh. I know that when you smile, it feels like the sun coming out after a storm." He took a deep breath. "I know that I am falling in love with you, and I do not care that you are an orc and I am human. I do not care what anyone else thinks. I just care about you." Nara's expression went through a rapid series of changes: shock, confusion, fear, and finally, something that might have been hope. "Gareth, this is insane. Your people and my people have been enemies for generations. If anyone found out, then we will not let them find out, or if they do, we will face it together." He reached out and gently took her hand. "Nara, I have spent years fighting in other people's wars, defending borders I do not care about. For once in my life, I want to fight for something that matters. For someone that matters. Let me do that. Let me stay." She looked down at their joined hands, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I am afraid." "So am I," Gareth admitted, "but I am more afraid of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been." Nara lifted her eyes to his, and in them, he saw his own feelings reflected. "I did not think I could feel this way again. After losing my family, I thought my heart had died with them. But you make me want to hope. You make me want to believe that there could be a future, even after everything." "There can be," Gareth said, "if we are brave enough to reach for it." She leaned forward and kissed him, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Gareth wrapped his arms around her carefully, mindful of her still healing ribs, and let himself fall into the moment. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "So you will stay?" Nara asked. "I will stay," Gareth confirmed. "Though we need to figure out the practicalities. I cannot just disappear from the military without consequences, and we need to think about the long term. This cabin is a good temporary shelter, but winter is coming." They spent the next few days planning. Gareth would return to Fort Millstone, explain that he was resigning his commission, and collect his final pay. It would not be a pleasant conversation, but he had served his contracted time and then some. Legally, they could not stop him. With his savings and his final payment, they would have enough money to start a small homestead somewhere remote, far from both human settlements and orc territories. The plan was solid, and Gareth felt optimistic as he rode back to the fort. He would be in and out within 2 days, he figured. 3 at most. What he had not anticipated was running into his old friend Marcus at the fort gates. Marcus Grayson had served with Gareth for years, and they had saved each other's lives more than once. He was also observant and stubborn, and he took one look at Gareth's face and knew something was up. "You look different," Marcus said, falling into step beside Gareth as they walked through the fort. "Happier. What happened during your leave?" "Nothing much," Gareth said, trying to sound casual. "Just needed some time to clear my head." "Right. And this sudden resignation you have put in has nothing to do with clearing your head." "I have been thinking about leaving for a while. You know that." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "You met someone." Gareth's step faltered slightly and Marcus laughed. "I knew it. Who is she?" "Someone from one of the villages." "It is complicated," Gareth said. "It always is," Marcus replied. "But you look happy, brother. That is what matters. When do I get to meet her?" "You do not," Gareth said firmly. "Marcus, I appreciate your curiosity, but this needs to stay private. Please." Something in his tone must have gotten through, because Marcus raised his hands in surrender. All right, I will not pry. But if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." "I know, thank you." The conversation with his commander was tense but brief. The man was clearly annoyed at losing a good soldier, but he could not legally prevent Gareth from leaving once his contracted time was up. Gareth collected his pay, packed his few belongings, and prepared to leave the fort for the last time. He was in the stables, saddling his horse, when the alarm bells began to ring. Gareth's military instincts kicked in immediately. He ran toward the command center, where soldiers were already gathering. His former commander was shouting orders, and Gareth caught enough to understand the situation. A large raiding party had been spotted moving toward a nearby village. All available soldiers were being mobilized to intercept them. Gareth told himself it was not his problem anymore. He had resigned. He was a civilian now. He should get on his horse and ride west back to Nara. But he could not do it. He thought of the burned farmstead, of the dead families he had failed to save. If he left now and that village was destroyed, he would carry that guilt forever. "I am coming with you," he told his commander. The man looked surprised but nodded. "Get your gear." The ride to the village took 3 hours, and they arrived to find the raiders already attacking. It was chaos, a swirling melee of soldiers and raiders and panicked villagers trying to flee. Gareth threw himself into the fight, his sword moving in the practiced patterns he had learned over years of combat. He was fighting off 2 raiders when he saw her. Nara was there on the edge of the battle, helping villagers escape. She must have followed him, worried when he did not return as quickly as expected. His heart lurched with fear for her. She was still recovering from her injuries, and she was in terrible danger. If any of the soldiers realized she was an orc, they would attack her without hesitation. He cut down one raider and was moving toward Nara when he heard the order. "Archers, volley on my mark." Gareth looked up and saw the line of archers on the ridge above. Arrows nocked and aimed at the battlefield. The angle was all wrong. They would hit fleeing villagers as well as raiders. They would hit Nara. He ran. He was not close enough. He knew he was not close enough. But he ran anyway, his legs pumping, his lungs burning. Nara saw him coming and her eyes widened. She started to move toward him, and that was when he heard it. Loose. The arrows fell like deadly rain, dozens of them, blotting out the sky. Gareth reached Nara and threw his shield over her, covering her body with his own as the volley struck. The impacts were like hammer blows. One arrow punched through his shoulder. Another buried itself in his thigh. A third glanced off his armor but left a deep gash across his ribs. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but Gareth did not move. He kept himself between Nara and the arrows, kept his shield raised, kept her safe. When the volley ended, there was a moment of terrible silence. Then Nara was screaming his name, trying to push him off without hurting him worse. Gareth rolled to the side, gasping for breath, and looked up at her tear-streaked face. "You are alive," he managed to say. "That is all that matters." "You idiot," she sobbed. "You stupid, brave idiot." The battle was ending around them. The raiders were retreating and the soldiers were regrouping. Marcus appeared out of the chaos, his eyes going wide when he saw Gareth's injuries and the orc girl cradling him. "Oh, hell," Marcus said. "So that is what complicated means." "Marcus," Gareth said through gritted teeth, "I need your help." To his credit, Marcus did not hesitate. He looked at Nara, then back at Gareth, and nodded. "What do you need? Get us out of here, before anyone else sees, please." Marcus glanced around, assessing the situation. The other soldiers were focused on securing the village and tending to their own wounded. In the confusion, no one was paying attention to them. "Can you ride?" "If I have to," Gareth said. Between them, Marcus and Nara got Gareth onto his horse. The pain was excruciating, and Gareth nearly passed out twice, but he stayed conscious through sheer willpower. Marcus led them away from the battlefield, using back paths and game trails to avoid being seen. They reached the cabin as the sun was setting. Marcus helped get Gareth inside and laid him out on the bed while Nara frantically gathered her medical supplies. She had been learning healing skills from watching Gareth tend to her, and now she put that knowledge to desperate use. "The arrows need to come out," she said, her voice shaking. "This is going to hurt." "Do it," Gareth said. Marcus held him down while Nara worked. She was as gentle as possible, but each arrow that came free was agony. Gareth bit down on a leather strap and tried not to scream. When it was finally done, Nara cleaned and bandaged the wounds while Marcus watched with a mixture of concern and fascination. "She is good at this," Marcus commented. "She is good at everything," Gareth said weakly. Nara finished bandaging and sat back, her hands covered in his blood. She was crying again, silent tears streaming down her face. "You could have died. You almost did die. Why would you do that?" "Because I love you," Gareth said simply. "Because a world without you in it is not one I want to live in." Marcus cleared his throat. "I am going to give you two some privacy. But Gareth, we need to talk about what happens next. The military will notice you are gone, and if anyone saw her—" He gestured at Nara. "I know," Gareth said. "Give us a few days. Let me heal enough to travel, then we will disappear. Go somewhere they will never find us." Marcus nodded slowly. "I will buy you that time. I will tell them you went after fleeing raiders and I lost track of you in the chaos. That should give you a week, maybe more. But after that, I cannot help you." "You have already helped us more than we had any right to ask," Gareth said. "Thank you, brother." Marcus clasped his hand carefully, avoiding the injured shoulder. "You are sure about this, about her, about throwing away everything for this. Gareth looked at Nara, who was watching him with those deep, dark eyes. I have never been more sure of anything. Then I wish you both the best, Marcus said. He turned to Nara. Take care of him. He is a good man, even if he is an idiot sometimes. I will, Nara promised. I will protect him the way he protected me. After Marcus left, the cabin fell quiet except for the crackling of the fire. Nara curled up carefully beside Gareth on the bed, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I was so scared, she whispered. When I saw those arrows falling when you covered me, I thought I was going to lose you, just like I lost everyone else. Gareth stroked her hair with his good hand. You did not lose me, I am right here. But you could have died. You took those arrows for me. And I would do it again, Gareth said firmly. Nara, you need to understand something. I meant what I said. I love you. That means I will always choose to protect you no matter the cost. She lifted her head to look at him. Even if the cost is your life, especially then. Because what is the point of living if I have to do it without you? She kissed him gently, carefully, mindful of his injuries. I love you too, Gareth Ironwood. I think I have loved you since the night you found me in the woods and offered me kindness when you could have offered a blade. We are quite a pair, Gareth said with a weak smile. A deserter soldier and a clanless orc, both running from everything we have ever known. Running towards something, I think, Nara corrected. Toward a future, together. Together, Gareth agreed. I like the sound of that. The next week was difficult. Gareth's injuries were serious, and he developed a fever that had Nara terrified. She barely slept, constantly checking his bandages, forcing him to drink water and eat broth even when he did not want to. She talked to him through the worst of it, telling him stories from her childhood, singing orc songs in a surprisingly sweet voice, begging him to hold on. On the 5th day, the fever broke. Gareth woke clear-eyed and hungry, and Nara cried with relief. He was not out of danger yet, but the worst had passed. Marcus visited once during that time, bringing supplies and news. The military had bought his story about Gareth pursuing raiders. Officially, Gareth was listed as missing in action, presumed either dead or still in pursuit. Marcus had quietly spread rumors that Gareth had talked about heading far north, toward the coastal cities. It would send any potential searchers in the wrong direction. You have maybe 2 more weeks before they stop looking and classify you as dead or deserted, Marcus said. After that, you should be clear as long as you stay away from military installations and anyone who knew you. We will, Gareth promised. We are thinking of heading east toward the mountain valleys. There are supposed to be homesteads out there, people who do not ask too many questions. Marcus nodded. That sounds like a good plan, just promise me one thing. What? Be happy. You have given up everything for this, make it worth it. I will, Gareth said. I promise. After Marcus left for the final time, Gareth and Nara began preparing in earnest for their departure. Gareth was healing, slowly but steadily. The arrow wounds were closing cleanly with no signs of infection. In another week, he would be strong enough to travel. They spent their evenings planning their new life. They would find a remote valley, build a cabin, start a farm. They would live simply and quietly, far from the conflicts that had defined both their lives. Maybe, eventually, they would find other refugees like themselves, people who had chosen love over loyalty to kingdoms and clans. They could build a community where orcs and humans lived in peace. It was a dream, but it was a dream worth fighting for. One night as they lay together by the fire, Nara said, "In my clan, we had a bonding ceremony. It was not exactly like human marriage, but similar. 2 people would exchange vows before the clan elders, promising to stand together through all hardships. We do not have any elders to witness us," Gareth pointed out. "We have each other, and I think that is enough." She sat up and looked at him seriously. "Gareth Ironwood, I want to bond with you. I want to make a formal promise, not just in words, but in the way my people have done for generations. Will you do that with me?" Gareth felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Nara, there is nothing I want more, but I do not know the orc ceremonies." "You will have to teach me," she smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "It is simple. We just speak from the heart." They knelt facing each other, and Nara took both his hands in hers. When she spoke, it was in a mixture of her native tongue and the common language, her voice strong and clear. "I, Nara, daughter of Thrak and Mira, claim you as my bonded mate. I promise to stand with you in times of plenty and times of want. I promise to defend you as you have defended me. I promise to love you until my last breath, and beyond if the spirits allow. You are my chosen, my heart, my home." Gareth felt tears prick his eyes as he responded, making up the words as he went but meaning every single one. "I, Gareth Ironwood, son of farmers, brother to none, claim you as my wife and partner. I promise to cherish you, to protect you, to honor the trust you have placed in me. I promise to build a life with you that is worthy of your courage and strength. You are my future, my love, my everything." Nara leaned forward and kissed him, and it felt like sealing a sacred pact. When they pulled apart, they were both crying and smiling at the same time. "We are bonded now," Nara said. "In the eyes of my people, we are married." "Then I am the luckiest man alive," Gareth said. 2 weeks later, they were ready to leave. Gareth's wounds had healed enough for travel, though he still moved carefully. They packed everything they could carry onto 2 horses, Gareth's military mount, and a second one that Marcus had quietly provided. They left the cabin at dawn, riding east into the rising sun. The journey took them through wild country, forests and hills that saw few travelers. They avoided settlements, camping in the wilderness and living off the land. Nara proved to be an excellent hunter, bringing down rabbits and deer with a skill that impressed Gareth. He contributed his knowledge of edible plants and his ability to cook a decent meal over a campfire. They talked as they traveled, sharing more of their histories, their hopes, their fears. Gareth told her about his childhood, about the little sister he had lost to fever when he was 12, about the guilt he still carried over not being able to save her. Nara told him about the first time she had seen the ocean, about her dream of learning to read and write, about the baby brother she had adored who had been killed in the raid that destroyed her family. They cried together, laughed together, and slowly built the foundation of a life together. A month into their journey, they reached the eastern mountains. The valleys here were remote and beautiful, with clear streams and thick forests. They explored carefully, looking for the right place to settle. They needed good water, flat land for farming, shelter from the worst of the winter weather, and enough isolation that they would not attract unwanted attention. They found it in a narrow valley tucked between 2 peaks. A stream ran through it, fed by snowmelt from above. The valley floor was covered in thick grass, and the surrounding forest was full of game. Best of all, there was no sign of human or orc habitation anywhere nearby. "This is it," Gareth said, looking around with satisfaction. "This is where we build our home." They spent the autumn preparing. Gareth's carpentry skills were limited, but he knew the basics, and Nara was strong enough to help with the heavy work. They felled trees, shaped logs, and slowly raised the walls of a cabin. It was hard, exhausting work, but it was also deeply satisfying. Every log they placed, every beam they secured, was a piece of their future taking shape. They finished the cabin just as the first snow began to fall. It was small and rough, but it was solid and warm, and it was theirs. They moved their few belongings inside and stood together in the doorway, looking out at their valley. "We did it," Nara said softly. "We actually did it." "We did," Gareth agreed. He wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her close. "Welcome home." That winter was the happiest time of Gareth's life. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, with nothing to do but keep the fire burning and enjoy each other's company. They cooked together, told stories, made love, and planned for the spring. They would plant a garden, expand the cabin, maybe add some chickens and a goat. They would make this valley bloom. There were hard moments, too. Nara sometimes woke from nightmares, crying out for her lost family. Gareth would hold her until the shaking stopped, whispering reassurances. And Gareth had his own demons. Some nights he dreamed of the battlefield, of the arrows falling, of all the people he had failed to save. But they learned to comfort each other, to share their burdens and their grief. As winter slowly gave way to spring, they began to venture out of the valley more. They needed supplies they could not make themselves: seeds for planting, tools for farming, cloth for clothes. That meant traveling to settlements and trading, which meant risk. They decided Gareth would do the trading. His appearance would not attract suspicion, and he could claim to be a trapper or hunter living alone in the mountains. It was not too far from the truth. The nearest settlement was a small trading post 3 days' ride from their valley. It was a rough place, frequented by trappers, prospectors, and others who preferred the frontier to civilization. Gareth fit right in, and no one asked him too many questions. He was loading supplies onto his horse when a familiar voice made him freeze. "Gareth, Gareth Ironwood, is that really you?" He turned and saw one of his old squad mates, a man named Thomas. His heart sank, but he forced a smile. "Thomas, good to see you." Thomas clasped his arm, grinning. "We all thought you were dead. Marcus said you went after raiders and never came back. Where have you been?" "Here and there," Gareth said vaguely. "Decided the military life was not for me after all. I have been trapping in the mountains." "By yourself? That is a hard life, brother." "I like the solitude," Gareth said. He needed to end this conversation before Thomas got too curious. "Listen, it is good to see you, but I need to get back. Long ride ahead." Of course." Thomas hesitated, then said, "You know, if you ever want to rejoin, the commander would take you back in a heartbeat. We could use good men like you." "I appreciate that, but I am done with that life," Gareth said firmly. "Take care of yourself, Thomas." He rode away before the man could say anything else, his heart pounding. It was a reminder of how precarious their safety was. If Thomas mentioned seeing him, if word got back to the fort, if anyone decided to investigate. He pushed the worry aside. They had come too far to let fear control them now. When he got back to the valley, Nara was working in the garden plot they had cleared. She looked up at his approach and smiled, and Gareth felt his anxiety melt away. This was worth any risk. That night, as they lay in bed, he told her about the encounter with Thomas. She listened quietly, then said, "We should be more careful. Maybe I should go with you next time, stay hidden nearby, just in case." "I do not want to put you in danger," Gareth protested. "And I do not want to lose you," Nara countered. "We are bonded, Gareth. That means we face dangers together, not separately." He could not argue with that logic. So the next time he went to the trading post, Nara came with him. She stayed in the forest outside the settlement while he traded, but knowing she was nearby made him feel better. It became their new pattern. They were partners in everything, just as they had promised. Spring turned to summer and their garden flourished. They had potatoes, beans, carrots, and herbs. They caught fish in the stream and hunted deer in the forest. They were not living in luxury, but they had enough, and they had each other. One evening in midsummer, as they sat outside watching the stars come out, Nara said, "I have been thinking about the future." "What about it?" Gareth asked. "What if we are not the only ones? What if there are others like us, people who have crossed the boundaries between human and orc? There probably are, Gareth said. The world is a big place. What if we could find them? What if we could create a place where everyone is welcome, regardless of what species they are, a true sanctuary? Gareth considered that. It was a bold idea, maybe even a dangerous one. But it was also beautiful. That would take time and resources, and we would have to be very careful about how we went about it. I know, Nara said, but maybe we could start small. If we hear of others in situations like ours, we could offer them help. Let them know they are not alone. You have a kind heart, Gareth said, kissing her forehead. And I think it is a wonderful idea. We will see what we can do. That night, they made love under the stars, and Gareth felt truly at peace for the first time in his life. He had found his purpose, his home, his love. The future was uncertain, but he would face it with Nara at his side, and that made all the difference. As summer progressed, they began hearing stories from travelers and traders. Stories of other mixed couples, human and orc, who had fled their homes to escape persecution. Stories of secret settlements where the two species lived in uneasy but genuine cooperation. The world was changing slowly, and Gareth and Nara were part of that change. One day, a young orc woman appeared at the edge of their valley. She was thin and exhausted, her clothes in tatters. Nara saw her first and called for Gareth. Together they approached carefully. "Please," the young woman said in heavily accented common tongue. "I need help. I am running from my clan. They want to force me to marry a warrior I do not love." Nara and Gareth exchanged glances. This was exactly the kind of situation they had talked about. "You are safe here," Nara said, switching to the orc language. "Come, we will feed you and give you shelter." The young woman's name was Kira, and she stayed with them for 2 weeks. During that time, Nara taught her useful skills, and Gareth helped her plan her next move. She wanted to go west, to the coastal cities where she had heard orcs could live more freely. They gave her supplies, directions, and a weapon for protection. "Thank you," Kira said on the day she left. "You have given me hope that there are good people in this world. I will not forget your kindness." After she was gone, Nara turned to Gareth with tears in her eyes. "We helped her. We actually helped her." "We did," Gareth said, pulling her into his arms, "and we will help others whenever we can." Word began to spread, though they were not sure how. Perhaps Kira had mentioned them to other travelers. Perhaps Marcus had quietly let certain people know about the valley and the couple who lived there. Whatever the reason, more people began to appear at their door. A human man fleeing debts and a bad marriage. An orc boy who did not want to become a warrior. A mixed couple, human and orc, who had nowhere else to turn. Gareth and Nara helped them all. They never turned anyone away who came in genuine need. They offered food, shelter, advice, and above all, acceptance. Their cabin became a way station for the lost and the desperate, a beacon of hope in a harsh world. It was not always easy. Supplies ran low. Some guests overstayed their welcome. There were a few who tried to take advantage of their generosity. But Gareth and Nara faced each challenge together, and their bond only grew stronger. One autumn evening, nearly 2 years after they had first arrived in the valley, Nara told Gareth she was pregnant. He stared at her in shock for a long moment, then whooped with joy and spun her around, careful not to jostle her too much. "A baby! We are going to have a baby, we are," Nara said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I am scared, Gareth. I do not know anything about raising a child. And a half-orc, half-human child. What kind of life will they have?" "They will have a good life," Gareth said firmly. "They will have parents who love them and a home where they are safe. They will grow up knowing that their heritage is something to be proud of, not ashamed of." "We will make sure of it." Nara hugged him tightly. I love you so much. I love you too, both of you. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. We are going to be a family. The pregnancy was not easy. Nara suffered from terrible sickness in the early months, and Gareth did everything he could to make her comfortable. He took over most of the physical work, hunted and cooked and cleaned while she rested. He read to her from the few books they had, and he talked to the baby even though it was too early to hear. As winter set in again, Nara's belly began to swell visibly. They spent long evenings discussing names and planning for the arrival. They expanded the cabin, adding a small room for the baby. They collected soft furs and woven blankets, preparing a nest for their child. The baby was born on a cold night in early spring, with only Gareth there to help. It was terrifying and messy and painful, but when he finally held his daughter in his arms, Gareth understood for the first time what true love meant. She was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled, with a dusting of dark hair and skin that was a soft green tinged olive. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's nose, a beautiful blend of both her parents. She is gorgeous, Gareth whispered, placing the baby in Nara's arms. Nara looked down at their daughter with wonder. What should we name her? They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his daughter, Gareth knew exactly what her name should be. Hope, he said. We should call her Hope, because that is what she represents. Hope for a better future, for a world where people like us can live in peace. Hope, Nara repeated softly. I love it. Raising Hope was the hardest and most rewarding thing Gareth had ever done. She was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh. As she grew, it became clear she had inherited the best traits of both species. She was strong like her mother, but with a human's flexibility and endurance. She was clever and curious, constantly exploring her world. The travelers who passed through their valley were delighted by Hope. She became a symbol for many of them, proof that humans and orcs could not only coexist, but create something beautiful together. Some stayed longer just to play with her, and Gareth and Nara found themselves at the center of a growing community. By the time Hope was 2 years old, 3 other families had settled in the valley permanently. One was a human couple who had been outcasts from their village for helping orcs. Another was an older orc man who had been a healer in his clan and wanted to live out his remaining years in peace. The third was another mixed couple, an orc woman and a human man who had heard about the valley from Kira and traveled for months to find it. Together, they built more cabins, expanded the farms, and created something that had once seemed impossible. A true community where species did not matter, where everyone was judged by their character and their willingness to contribute. Gareth stood on a hill overlooking the valley one summer evening, watching the smoke rise from the various cabins, listening to the sounds of laughter and conversation drifting up from below. Hope was playing with the other children, her giggles bright and clear. Nara came up beside him and took his hand. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am," Gareth said honestly. 4 years ago, I was a soldier with no purpose beyond fighting other people's wars. Now I have you and Hope and all of this. He gestured at the valley below. I never could have imagined this life. I never could have imagined any life after my family died, Nara said quietly. I thought my story was over, but you gave me a new beginning. You gave me hope before we ever had our daughter. Gareth pulled her close. We gave each other hope. That is what love does. It transforms despair into possibility. They stood together in the fading light, watching their daughter play, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and good. The world beyond their valley was still full of conflict and prejudice. But here, in this small corner of the wilderness, they had created peace. It was not always easy. There were challenges, conflicts, moments when old prejudices reared their heads even in this sanctuary. But Gareth and Nara faced them together, as they had always done. They mediated disputes, offered guidance, and above all, led by example. Their love was the foundation upon which the entire community was built. One day, Marcus appeared at the valley. He was older now, grayer, with new scars and a weariness in his eyes that spoke of hard years. Gareth saw him first and ran down the hill to greet his old friend. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Marcus embraced him, then stepped back to look him over. "You look good, brother, happy. I had to see for myself if the stories were true." Stories. They say there is a valley in the eastern mountains where humans and orcs live together in peace. They say it was founded by a deserter soldier and an orc woman, and that they have created a sanctuary for anyone fleeing persecution. Marcus smiled. "I hoped it might be you." "It is us," Gareth confirmed. "Come, let me show you what we have built." Marcus stayed for a week, and Gareth could see him slowly relaxing, the tension leaving his shoulders as he experienced the peace of the valley. He met Nara and was charmed by her. He played with Hope and declared her the most beautiful child he had ever seen. He talked with the other residents and listened to their stories. On his last night, he and Gareth sat by a fire, sharing a bottle of decent whiskey that Marcus had brought. "I envy you," Marcus said quietly. "You got out, you found something worth living for. I am still trapped in that cycle of violence, fighting wars I do not believe in." "Then leave," Gareth said. "You have served long enough. Take your discharge and come here. We would welcome you." Marcus shook his head. "I wish I could. But I am not as brave as you, brother. I do not know how to live any other way." "It is not about bravery," Gareth argued. "It is about choosing. Every day I choose this life, this love, this peace. You could make the same choice." "Maybe someday," Marcus said, "but not yet." "I am glad I came, though. It gives me hope to know that places like this exist, that not everything is darkness and conflict." When Marcus left, he carried with him a letter from Gareth. In it, Gareth had written detailed directions to the valley and an open invitation to anyone who needed sanctuary. He had asked Marcus to share it carefully, only with those he trusted, but to share it nonetheless. The valley could accommodate more people, and there were so many who needed what they offered. Over the next few years, the community grew steadily. They built a proper meeting hall, a communal kitchen, even a small schoolhouse where the children could learn. Nara taught healing and herbalism. Gareth taught basic carpentry and wilderness survival. The old orc healer taught the young people about orc history and culture. The human farmers taught crop rotation and animal husbandry. It was not perfect. They had arguments and disagreements. Resources were sometimes scarce. The winters were brutal, but they persevered because they all shared a common belief that people of different species could live together in harmony if they chose to. Hope grew into a bright, confident child, utterly at ease with her mixed heritage. She spoke both common and orcish fluently. She played with human and orc children without distinction. She was the living embodiment of the valley's ideals, and everyone loved her. On her 5th birthday, the entire community gathered for a celebration. There was food and music and laughter. Children ran wild while adults told stories and danced. It was a perfect evening, and as Gareth watched his daughter blow out the candles on her cake, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. That night, after Hope had been put to bed, Gareth and Nara sat outside their cabin, looking up at the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Nara asked. "Giving up your old life for this?" "Never," Gareth said without hesitation. "Not even for a second, do you?" "No." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I think about my family, about what they would think of all this. I like to believe they would be proud." "They would be," Gareth assured her. You have honored their memory by building a life full of love and purpose. We built it together, Nara corrected. She turned to look at him, her eyes shining in the starlight. Do you remember that day? When the arrows fell. Every detail, Gareth said. You did not hesitate. You threw yourself over me without thinking about the cost. That was the moment I knew I would love you forever, not because you saved my life, but because you valued mine more than your own. I would do it again, Gareth said. 1,000 times over, I know. She kissed him gently. That is what makes you the man I love. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Nara said, Hope asked me today if she could have a little brother or sister. Gareth laughed. Did she now? And what did you tell her? That we would think about it. Nara smiled mischievously. What do you think? Should we give her a sibling? I think, Gareth said, pulling her closer. That would be wonderful. A year later, they welcomed a son into the world. They named him Throck after Nara's father. He had his father's light hair and his mother's sturdy build, and from the moment he was born, Hope adored him. Life continued in the valley, a steady rhythm of seasons and growth. More families arrived, drawn by stories of the sanctuary. They expanded their farms, dug irrigation channels, built better roads. The settlement began to feel less like a desperate refuge and more like a genuine home. Word of their success spread further than Gareth had anticipated. One day, a delegation arrived from a human town 2 weeks' ride away. They wanted to establish trade relations. It was a momentous occasion, the first time a human settlement had officially recognized their community. Gareth and Nara negotiated carefully. They agreed to trade their surplus crops and handcrafted goods in exchange for tools, seeds, and other supplies they could not produce themselves. It was a small step, but an important one. Official recognition meant legitimacy, and legitimacy meant safety. Not everyone was happy about their existence, of course. There were still those who hated the idea of humans and orcs living together. They received occasional threats, and once a group of raiders tried to attack the valley, but the community was ready. They had built defenses and trained everyone in basic combat. The raiders were driven off, and word spread that the valley was not an easy target. Through it all, Gareth and Nara remained the heart of the community. They were not rulers or lords, but they were undeniably leaders. People came to them for advice, for mediation, for comfort. They took that responsibility seriously, always striving to be fair and compassionate. On their 10th anniversary of arriving in the valley, the community threw them a celebration. It was overwhelming to see how many lives they had touched, how many people called this place home, because of the choice they had made a decade ago to love despite the odds. During the celebration, an elderly human woman approached them. She had arrived in the valley just a few months earlier, fleeing an abusive situation in her home village. I want to thank you, she said, tears in her eyes. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that the world is not all cruelty and hate. You saved my life, not by grand gestures, but by simply existing and showing that love is possible. Nara embraced her gently. You saved yourself by having the courage to come here. We just provided a place for that courage to flourish. As the celebration continued, Gareth pulled Nara aside for a private moment. They walked to the hill where they often went to watch the valley, the place that had become their special spot. 10 years, Gareth marveled. It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. We have built something extraordinary, Nara said. Our children will grow up in a world we could only dream of. Speaking of which, Gareth said with a grin, Hope has been dropping hints about wanting another sibling. Nara laughed. She is relentless. And I think Throck would enjoy having a playmate closer to his age. So, is that a yes? That is a yes, Nara confirmed. She wrapped her arms around him. I want to fill our home with children and laughter. I want to keep building this life with you for as long as we both shall live." "Then that is what we will do," Gareth said. He kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and gratitude into that single gesture. Below them, the valley was alive with light and music. Children played in the gathering darkness, their species indistinguishable in the shadows, united in their joy. Adults talked and laughed, sharing food and stories. It was everything Gareth had ever wanted, even when he had not known what to want. He thought about the soldier he had been, about the arrows falling from the sky, about the split-second decision that had changed everything. He had thrown his shield over Nara without thinking, acting on pure instinct and love. That single moment of sacrifice had led to all of this. "You ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently?" Nara asked, as if reading his thoughts. "Sometimes," Gareth admitted. "But then I look at what we have and I cannot imagine any other path. Every choice, every hardship, every moment of fear and doubt led us here. I would not change any of it." "Neither would I," Nara said softly. "You are my hero, Gareth Ironwood. Not because you saved my life that day, but because you keep choosing me, choosing us, every single day." "You are my hero too," Gareth replied. "You taught me what it means to be truly brave. Not the courage of battle, but the courage to love, to build, to hope. You gave me a life worth living." They stood together as the stars came out, watching over their valley, their community, their family. The future was still uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and fear, but they would face them together as they always had. Gareth thought about the young soldier he had been, cynical and weary, convinced that the world was nothing but violence and loss. He wished he could go back and tell that young man that there was hope, that love was real, that sacrifice could lead to something beautiful. But he could not go back, and he would not want to even if he could. The present was too precious, too full of love and possibility. He had found his purpose, his home, his heart. He had found everything he needed in the arms of an orc girl he had saved from falling arrows, and who had saved him in return. As the celebration continued below, Gareth held Nara close and whispered, "Thank you for saying yes to this life, to me, to all of it." "Thank you for covering me with your shield," Nara whispered back. "Thank you for being willing to take those arrows. Thank you for showing me that humans can be kind, that love can transcend hatred, that there is always hope." They kissed again under the stars, and in that moment, everything was perfect. The valley was their sanctuary, their community was their family, and their love was the foundation upon which it all stood. Years would pass. Their children would grow. The community would continue to expand and thrive. There would be joys and sorrows, triumphs and setbacks. But through it all, Gareth and Nara would remain constant, their love a beacon for all who sought refuge from a world that too often chose hate over understanding. The arrows that had nearly killed them both had instead forged something unbreakable. In protecting Nara with his body, Gareth had protected their future, their family, their dream of a better world. And in accepting his protection, in choosing to love him despite every reason not to, Nara had shown him what true courage looked like. They walked back down the hill hand in hand, rejoining their community, their family, their life. Hope ran up to them, Throck toddling behind her, and they scooped their children into their arms. The celebration swirled around them, full of music and laughter and love. This was what they had fought for. This was what they had sacrificed for. This was what made every hardship worth it. They had built a place where love mattered more than species, where acceptance triumphed over prejudice, where hope was not just a name but a living reality. And as Gareth looked at his wife, his children, his friends and neighbors, He knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. Every choice. From that first moment, he had offered kindness to a terrified orc girl in the woods. To the instant he had thrown his shield over her and taken the volley of arrows. To this very moment surrounded by love and life. He had chosen love over hate, hope over despair, courage over fear. And in doing so, he had found everything worth living for. The celebration lasted late into the night, and when it finally ended, Gareth and Nara walked home with their sleeping children in their arms. They tucked Hope and Throck into their beds, kissed their foreheads, and retreated to their own room. As they lay together in the darkness, Nara said, "I love you, Gareth Ironwood." "I love you too, Nara," Gareth replied. "Today, tomorrow, and always." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, secure in their love, their home, their future. Outside, the valley slept peacefully, protected by the bonds of community and the power of love that transcended all boundaries. The arrows had rained down on them both that day so many years ago. Gareth had thrown his shield over Nara and taken the volley, nearly dying in the process. But from that moment of sacrifice had grown something miraculous. A love that conquered hatred. A community that defied prejudice. A family that embodied hope. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the arrows, not the pain, not the sacrifices they had made. What mattered was what they had built together, the life they had created, the love that sustained them through every challenge. They had taken the worst the world could throw at them and transformed it into something beautiful. And they would continue to do so day after day, year after year for the rest of their lives. Because that was what love did. It endured. It transformed. It created light in the darkest places. And Gareth and Nara's love, born in a moment of desperate protection, tempered by hardship and sacrifice, had created a light that would shine for generations to come.